this week on the Navigating Personal Growth podcast.
Because today you are being given the permission to bloom. Right? Embracing the slow growth in life without guilt and hustle. Hey Navigators, my name is Brooke Plack and I'm your host here today on the Navigating Personal Growth podcast, and I'm so glad you're here tuning in. If you're new, welcome. You're here for a treat. And if you are coming back to listen again from another episode, then welcome back. We're glad to have you. We focus on sharing stories so that we can help navigate through this life together, because we believe that everything on this podcast and everything in life is just a journey. There's no destination point this side of eternity. So here we are. And today's episode makes me want to take a big collective breath. So let's do that. Big, deep breath and let it out. Because today you are being given the permission to bloom. Right? Embracing the slow growth in life without guilt and hustle. That's what we're going to talk about today. So that just makes me feel like, yay, maybe like inspired. That's the word I was going for. And just like why growth doesn't have to look like hustle. So being an entrepreneur in my 20s, started my first business as 29, small businesses. They're all small business. I'm not a corporate girl, a mother and a wife and a friend and a family member, a sister, an aunt. I'm fixing to be a great aunt. I might be a great aunt by the time this episode goes live. So that's be super exciting. To a little girl named Ruthie Jane. I know I'm going to have a great niece. Isn't that nuts? I know, at 40 years old, I feel like that's like the best gift ever. I digress from the topic today. But all of those hats that we wear, we can very easily get drawn into the culture of hustle, the hustle culture. I need a side hustle. I need to hurry and do this. And then we start finding ourselves in a place where even if we sit still, we feel like we should be doing something, because doing has led us to feel like we matter. And that is a lie that the world wants us to believe. And so I first experienced this myself when I went to a women's conference and they were talking about idols. And I was like, oh, well, I don't have any gold idols that I'm worshiping, in my closet, so I must be good. And I have no idols. I believe in God. Here we are. And somewhere in the middle of that conference, it was like an epiphany. I feel like there are moments where just the divine intervention of God into our consciousness just changes the way you're thinking about things. And I literally heard the words in my brain, yeah, but you think if you're busy enough, you could be good enough. And my self-worth had come from and was coming from at that time being busy, hustling. And if I went back since then and looked through my Facebook posts, and like they would look like, oh, got up at 6 this morning and did, and then a list of all day of all the things I got done, and only 2 more things to go, and it's 10:45. I can make it. I've got this. Push, push, push. And there is a certain amount of grind it does take to launch businesses, so I will not negate that. But over the long-term sustainability of life, I don't recommend it. It is not the way to live. But once I realized that I was being busy so that I was important and I mattered in my world, it was even harder to break it. So yeah, they always say like acknowledging it's the first step to success, right? Well, it wasn't. It was like, it might have been the first step, but it was not the easiest step, because then it was like, then what? Then what am I supposed to do? If all this stuff doesn't get done, then, oh my gosh, my family, my businesses, my this, my that, and there was no thought about how my physical body, my emotional body, my energetic body, any of that was handling this well. And it wasn't. My health was declining. Crash sleeping on the weekends when I could and wasn't working, and then working ridiculously long 16-hour days at work every day, and also had a newborn, and I was shuffling him between pick him up, drop him off, pick him up, drop him off, pick him up, drop him off, and like working in short stints. And it was just hard and it didn't feel good. And I knew it wasn't aligned with my values, but trying to figure out how to get out of it was probably the hardest part. And so today, in today's episode, I'm just going to share a few of the lessons that I've learned through that process. And also, more than anything, just give you permission to bloom and slow down, right? Doesn't that feel good? Like you can grow quietly, gently, and without guilt. Does that seem like a foreign language? Because I really think that me 2 or 3 years ago would have been like, yeah, whatever. So if you're finding yourself saying that, that's okay. Keep listening. Don't change the podcast yet. Not till the end, right? Because here's what happens is the hustle culture that we're at in the 2020s in the US teaches us that if it's not loud, visible, or measurable, it doesn't count. And you know what that can do? It can cause comparison to creep in and realizing that if I'm not busy enough, doing enough, trying hard enough, then I'm not enough. And that's not true because we all are enough just as we are. And true growth can still be slow, subtle, and sometimes it can just be sitting still and knowing. We've been through a hard season in one of our companies recently, and I told my husband, I said, I have this undeniable peace over me of just letting things play out and knowing that everything is going to turn out okay and that we're just going to keep taking the next best step forward. It's not always about having the whole plan and the race and I don't need to do all that. Sometimes you just need to make the next best decision for every decision that's in front of you, right? And that's what helps us realize that, if you think about it like a plant in the middle of winter, it's dry and it's cold and it's deserted, but there's still something growing up under those rocks. Those roots are still twisting down low because when water comes, when enough nourishment is there, and when the timing is right, they bloom. And take that analogy and imagine that in your life right now. Maybe you find yourself in stormy waters. Maybe you find yourself in a valley where you feel all alone and desolate. Even in the desert, there's still stuff growing underneath. And what if we were letting that growth happen inside of us, underneath us, in our souls, at the bottoms of our feet, and know that it's going to sprout at the right time? But it doesn't have to all happen at the exact same time. And I think that's where the hustle fallacy and this hustle mentality gets us into this tizzy, and it causes its own level of anxiety and stress that sometimes, y'all, you're not going to want to hear this, we made up. We make up some of our own stress and anxiety because we think we should be richer, faster, skinnier, at the event, invited to the event, add it up. But there's not any should. So if you take the should off and you remove the fact that you're not going fast enough, then you can just be and take the next steps one step at a time. There's a quote from Rupi Kaur, I hope I'm saying that right, that says, "You do not wake up and become a butterfly. Growth is a process." And y'all, permission to bloom is really about allowing yourself not only to expand, but sometimes just to heal. Because when that caterpillar goes into that cocoon, anything that's wrong with it has got to get healed up first before it can truly sprout its wings and become a butterfly. And they don't come out of their chrysalis all at the same time, same speed, same size. And that's okay, because there's still a beautiful butterfly in bloom, right? You are still a beautiful butterfly in bloom, even if you're not blooming at the same time, the same speed, or in the same way that anyone else is around you. That's okay. So here's a couple questions for you to ponder. You can pause the podcast, journal it out. You can type it in the notes on your phone, or you can always come back, all right? Listen to these. Where in your life are you pushing too hard? or measuring your worth by what you do instead of who you're becoming? Where are you pushing too hard or measuring your worth by what you do instead of who you're becoming? My assistant Rebecca and I do quarterly reviews every quarter. And so when March ended, we did a quarterly review and we write down all our wins from the quarter. And it was the first time I told her, I said, I feel like a lot of my wins they didn't have to do with anything I was doing. It was more like I was noticing, I was becoming. And like, it was just a tiny little glimmer of like, that's growth, Brooke. Like, that's good. Stay on that. Stay in that, even in hard seasons. And here's my next question. What would it look like if you gave yourself permission to bloom at your own pace? We talk about teaching children in school at their own pace. Every fourth grader's not going to learn the exact same thing. That's why there's so many movements for homeschools and micro schools and charter schools and all the things. But what if you got to learn and grow and eventually bloom at your own pace? Life is not over at 40 or 50 or 60. It's just getting started. So there's never a timeline unless it's one you've chosen. Don't let anyone else's timeline interrupt your blooming process. All right, we're going to take a break in the podcast to do my favorite segment, Trivia in the Trenches. Then we're going to come back and talk about some navigation points on how we can continue to apply this in our lives before we wrap up the podcast today. Trivia in the Trenches. Six Flags in Texas is named for what? The six governments who ruled Texas over the years. Isn't that crazy? There's no way you knew that. If you knew that, you better email me or drop it in comments on social, because I have never ever heard of that, never knew that, never noticed it from the flag, nothing. So there's your fun facts for today. All right, our navigation points. And we call them navigation points because remember, at the beginning of the episode, I told you, we all believe in this community that we are just navigating through life the best we can. If we were on a ship and the storm came from this direction and the wave came from this way and then the wind came from this way, we're all just trying to get back on course, whatever that course looks like for us. And so I don't feel like that my job here is to know it all or do it all or be it all. But if I can share wisdom that I've learned in my life and wisdom I've learned from other people who've learned it from their lives and the ancestors that came before them, it makes all the world an easier place for us, right? Just a softer place for us to land. All right, so here are your navigation points for this week's episode. Slow growth is still growth. If you could put that on your forehead, slow growth is still growth. You don't have to be constantly achieving to be evolving, because emotional healing, mindset shifts, and inner peace, they are all quiet forms of transformation. So timeline, let it be what it is. You are not behind, you're blooming. Repeat that to yourself. I am not behind, I am blooming. Right? That's good, huh? Number 2, you don't need to prove your progress. You don't need to be like me, listing out every single thing you did and all your achievements on Facebook for all the world to see. You do not have to do that. Don't do that. You don't need to prove to anyone else that you're good enough, because I felt like I had to do enough to be good enough. You can bloom privately. And the need for extrovert validation often actually stunts our authentic growth. So much of our true growth happens in those quiet hours of silence and meditation and stillness and being alone, car drives, showers. I feel like I have a whole conversation with myself, especially on hair washing day, because I'm in there. You only wash my hair once a week, and I'm in there and I feel like I just take so much longer, and I have a whole new revelation about everything in life in the shower. And I don't think I'm alone in that. And also focus on how it feels, not just how it looks from the outside. Focus on how it feels. If you were left out from an invitation, instead of jumping to defense saying I was left out, first stop and think, how do I feel about being left out? Because it might actually not even matter. You might actually not have wanted to go anyway. And that's okay. That's okay. Everything's not meant for you. And lastly, create conditions in your life that nurture and not pressure. Okay, so I'm trying to do this one, but I got some stress in my life. And some of the stress can't be fixed overnight. So if you're like me, we're going to focus on what we can control, okay? So just like a plant needs sunlight and space and care, so do you. So figuring out what environment helps me grow. You may not be able to make the change overnight, but starting to think in the direction of what environment really helps me grow. It could be rest. It could be boundaries. It could be encouragement from friends, or maybe even silence, maybe solo travel. What is that environment? Because remember, like the roots forming under the rock, they're not going to bloom until the conditions are right, till we have water and sunlight to bring those plants out, right? So you are not going to bloom until the conditions are right. Think about it that way. And because, and this is a big one, growth thrives in safety, not stress. So when a situation becomes more stressful than can be tolerated, there will be no growth there. And for any party involved, that's okay, because sometimes there's a season in life when it's time for transition. And here's the final thought I want to close us out with for today. It's from Galatians 6:9 in the Bible. Let us not grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we don't give up. You are allowed to grow slowly. You are allowed to rest because you are still blooming. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to the Navigating Personal Growth podcast. I'm Brooke Plack. Join me again next week on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube. This podcast is produced by ClantonCreative.com.